I want you to imagine a winding path in the middle of a silent forest, illuminated only by the smallest strands of moonlight breaking through the canopy. Along this path, there are moments when God quietly arranges encounters so profound that you realize they could never be accidents. In one of these meetings, you crossed paths with a person who carried themselves with an air of unwavering confidence, convinced that they were somehow beyond the reach of all consequence. Driven by arrogance, they believed they could manipulate anyone they chose, discard those who no longer served their purposes, and walk away unscathed. Yet what they underestimated was that you were not simply another stranger. You were the final warning. A lamp piercing the darkness, a sacred interruption meant to open their eyes to the horizon of accountability before them. They were so mired in deception that they never recognized the significance of your presence. They thought your patience was naivety, your compassion was foolishness, and your gentle spirit was an invitation for further misuse. But beyond their sight, God was observant, noting every betrayal, every lie, every calculated act of cruelty. Now, the reckoning they thought would never come has quietly begun, and its power grows steadily, like clouds accumulating before a storm. The narcissism that anchored their existence was, from the beginning, based on delusion. They strutted through life declaring themselves superior, untouchable, effortlessly convincing themselves that genuine accountability was a myth. Because there were no immediate repercussions for their actions, they believed the scales of justice did not apply to them. They toyed with people's emotions and walked away again and again, untroubled by guilt or remorse. That illusion of control, however, was as brittle as old paper. It was destined to tear apart the moment divine justice arrived. Justice, after all, does not always erupt in a single explosion. It can travel patiently, unobserved, until it emerges in a way no one can predict. But people who believe they are above all laws, be they spiritual or moral, mistake any delay for a permanent escape. They imagine that if judgment hasn't come yet, it must never come at all. In truth, every lie they told, every manipulation they launched, every trusting heart they wounded, was sowing a seed that would, in time, bear poisonous fruit. For a while, they kept on going without interruption, wielding their arrogance like a shield. But God was not absent. God was not indifferent. God was simply watching as they spiraled deeper into destructive patterns, giving them space to reflect and turn from their ways. That space was meant as grace, a gift of time in which they might find humility and admit their need to change. But the narcissist usually chooses pride over self-awareness, perpetually feeding the delusion that because no lightning bolt strikes immediately, they must be home free. Yet into their story, God placed you, not randomly but strategically, like a final outstretched hand, offering them a way off a sinking ship. And they dismissed you with hardly a second glance, believing you were inconsequential. They believed they could replace your kindness as easily as one might replace a broken tool. In the same way Pharaoh hardened his heart when Moses implored him to let the Israelites go. In the same way the people of Noah's time laughed at the idea of a coming flood, this person refused to heed any echo of warning in your voice. They ridiculed the notion that consequences would one day catch up to them. By turning away from you, they turned away from God's own caution and tested the limits of divine forbearance. Over time, the first subtle shifts in their life began to appear. People who once clung to their every word started taking half steps back. What once had been easy, swaying others, commanding attention, imposing their will, became sluggish, forced, or even outright futile. The narcissist, still engrossed in their fantasy of invulnerability, might have dismissed these phenomena as passing nuisances. They simply searched for fresh victims, new environments where they believed they could exercise their manipulative talents again. But the truth is that no matter where they went, the seeds of their former actions remained ready to sprout into accountability. They realized too late that the world was not as docile as they thought. More people began to see through their facade. Rumors or whispers about their character spread. Some, who had once admired their charm, suddenly detected the undercurrent of malice in their actions. Relationships they took for granted began to crack under the strain. The high opinion in which they held themselves was mirrored less and less in the faces around them. They would try to recapture that old sense of control, but it no longer worked the way it used to. The moment you were removed from their life, by God's gracious hand, no less, was actually a turning point they failed to notice. Where they thought themselves triumphant in discarding you, they had actually lost an unparalleled blessing. You may have asked yourself, why was I thrust into such a painful situation? Why did I endure the torment of their manipulation, only to be pushed away in the end? The answer is that God sometimes sends a willing soul into the life of a profoundly broken individual to serve as a messenger. You embody qualities that reveal genuine love, true patience, deep empathy. Your presence is a steady reminder that there is a path to repentance and a chance at sincere transformation. But when someone persists in rejecting what is good, decent, and godly, they simultaneously reject God's invitation to turn back. It is never a coincidence that you became entangled in their sphere, endured their cruelty, and found yourself raising alarm after alarm that they refused to hear. In biblical history, we often read about final warnings, whether it was Noah's voice rising over the chaos, telling people that a flood approached, or Jonah calling upon the people of Nineveh to repent, or Christ urging the Pharisees to see beyond their dogmatic pride. Such warnings always tested the condition of the human heart. Some responded in time and reaped forgiveness. Others ignored it to disastrous effect. Modern life might not feature parted seas or towering arcs, but the principle remains. God still communicates truth to those who are ready, and also to those who desperately need an intersection before it's too late. When the narcissist ignored every gesture of compassion you showed, every calm explanation of how actions have consequences, every demonstration of love that might have softened their heart, they effectively set themselves against you, and by extension, against the divine hand that sent you. So what becomes of those who ignore that warning? In most cases, they remain blissfully unaware at first, parading through life as though they have won some grand prize. They don't realize that by cutting off a God-ordained person, they are cutting themselves off from blessings they may not find elsewhere. Perhaps for a brief moment they feel a surge of triumph, an intoxication of perceived freedom. But that sense of victory turns empty. People begin to take notice of who they really are. Opportunities evaporate. The narcissist tries to replicate your presence in someone else, scouring new relationships for the acceptance and tolerance they once saw in you. But it's not there. They never find the precise blend of grace and kindness they casually dismissed. It's a slow unraveling. Nights become heavier, because regret is a relentless traveler, stepping through every door, whispering in quiet moments. They recall your patience, how you treated them with a tenderness few others ever demonstrated, how you saw their flaws yet tried to help them rather than shame them. They remember all the times you could have walked away but stayed. They replay conversations where you brought insight or calm, while they responded with hostility and mocking. Bit by bit, a realization forms that maybe they destroyed something invaluable, yet these thoughts clash against their pride. They want to believe they can fill that void with someone else, or with endless distractions, career moves, superficial romance, indulgences that mask what they are missing. None of these band-aids hold up. It is only a matter of time before the hollowness returns. They thought you were merely a companion, friend, or partner they could replace as easily as one changes outfits. But what they lost was not just you. It was the covering of God's grace that stood with you. They never grasped that your presence in their life conferred intangible blessings, serenity, direction, and a chance at genuine transformation. By discarding you, they effectively rejected those quiet rivers of grace. As the months and years stretch on, they may appear externally the same, but their internal world is in decay. Opportunities they assumed would always be at their fingertips slip away. The success they boasted of feels incomplete. Friendships remain superficial, for they no longer attract people of true depth. Even if they do find some measure of outward advantage, it feels strangely hollow, devoid of meaning. Sometimes they try to reconnect, testing the waters to see if there is still any path back to you. But by this point, you have moved on. Your vision cleared of their manipulations. You have found your own clarity and discovered a new horizon, free from the toxicity they radiated. When God separates you from someone, it is often a permanent reprieve, a protective measure ensuring you will no longer be entangled in their destructive cycles. If you look back at moments in biblical stories, you see that once the Israelites left Egypt under God's authority, Pharaoh's attempt to recapture them ended disastrously. The parallel rings true. Once God leads you away from someone who refuses to repent, that separation generally remains. In your own process of healing, you wrestle with questions. Could I have done more? Should I have tried harder? But remember that the outcome was never yours to control. You did all that was required. You showed compassion, offered truth, mirrored love. You made it clear that their actions had consequences. Whether they chose to heed or ignore was beyond your power. Eventually, you realize you cannot save anyone who doesn't wish to be saved. You also see that divine timing is perfect. God placed you in that life as a catalyst. When that role was completed, He gently guided you to a safer place, away from the chaos. Your healing journey may have been painful, but it serves a higher purpose. You discover your own resilience. You identify toxic behavior more quickly and learn to guard your heart against those who only wish to exploit your empathy. You become stronger, more assured in your identity. Meanwhile, the one who dismissed you is left to wander their internal wilderness, aware at some level, even if they deny it, that they cast aside a chance that may never come again. Eventually, they come face to face with the reality that you were not merely a spare part in the machinery of their life. You were a secret harbor of rest, a potential turning point on their path. But by the time that realization dawns, the door is firmly shut. This finality sinks in like an anchor. There are no do-overs. Where once they believed in endless options, they now stand at an emotional dead end. They want redemption, but are too proud to humble themselves before God or you. And if they do attempt to approach you, they are met with a different person, someone who has learned to safeguard their space, someone who recognizes the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation, someone who no longer tolerates manipulation disguised as affection. What they discover is that you do not carry resentment, you carry freedom, and that freedom is something they cannot penetrate. The tragic irony is that you never set out to harm them. You brought love, kindness, and a genuine desire to lift them up. They misread it all as weakness. They planned strategies in their mind, certain they could maintain you as a backup. But in the unseen realm, God was orchestrating a test. Would they embrace the chance to change, or would they double down on their selfishness? By rejecting the messenger, they essentially rejected the message, turning away from a better destiny God was ready to unfold for them. Divine justice has a remarkable way of unfolding. It does not always come with thunder and earthquake. Sometimes it comes in the near-silent workings of conscience and consequence. When a narcissist looks around and sees that old admirers have distanced themselves, that personal achievements ring hollow, that fleeting pleasures no longer satisfy, and that the night feels eerily quiet, this is part of justice's work. It is a slow unveiling of the emptiness created by their own actions. And you, at that moment, may not even be aware of what they are going through, because your life has transitioned into calmer waters. That is part of God's grace to you. You don't need to witness their regret or downfall. Your healing and your future are not dependent on their suffering. Your strength comes from the one who called you onward. There is no need for revenge, no need for bitterness. You have walked away with a deeper sense of your divine worth. Their regret becomes their teacher. They might try to bury it, but regret will resurface again and again, reminding them of the opportunities they threw away. Such regret can manifest in countless ways: trouble in relationships, an unshakable loneliness, a gnawing discontent that no success can smother. As they wander, they might recall specific words you spoke, memories of moments when they had the choice to do better. Regret is rarely gentle. It asserts itself as the unstoppable echo of truth. But you need not concern yourself with that echo anymore. Your calling has shifted, leading you to new tasks and fresh blessings. Sometimes, you may feel a twinge of compassion for them, even after all the pain, because you can grasp that their path ahead is difficult. That is the mark of your integrity. Yet you also know it is no longer your responsibility to shepherd them or wait for them to see the light. By handing the situation over to God, you entrust them to the perfect judge, the one who sees every motive, every nuance, every vulnerable place in their soul. From a distance, you may one day hear of their downward spiral or see evidence of them trying to rebuild a tarnished reputation. You might sense that they remain locked in a toxic pattern, searching for ways to replicate what they had with you, but never quite succeeding. This is the sorrowful consequence of rejecting a divine gift. True blessings do not sprout easily after being spurned. They often reveal themselves as once-in-a-lifetime opportunities, especially if they were meant to redirect someone from a harmful path. And so their realization comes, not in a single revelation, but in 1,000 small stings that accumulate over time. They might have grand ideas about how to reclaim what was lost, to slip back into your good graces, to resurrect what they had confidently destroyed. But God's plan is usually to move you forward, not pull you back. By the time they muster the humility, if they ever do, you have already been placed on an entirely different trajectory, one no longer open to their interference. This is not cruelty, it is mercy, for you, above all. Divine love ensures you are shielded from further harm. Eventually, their pride could crack under the weight of solitude, regret, and the realization that they orchestrated their own heartbreak. In that moment, they may even fall to their knees and seek God's forgiveness. If they do so sincerely, God in His infinite mercy can guide them to healing. However, that does not guarantee a restoration of all they have forfeited. Some doors, once closed, remain sealed because God knows the damage that would ensue if they were reopened. The gift was offered at the right time, but they cast it aside. They have to reckon with that choice, whether in fleeting sadness or in an ongoing, heavy remorse. Yet for you, what remains is the peace of having fulfilled your calling. You were the voice whispering truth, the light illuminating the final chance for them to awaken to a better path. When they refused it, your mission was complete. God then led you away, protecting you from further harm. Perhaps you discovered renewed hope, deeper friendships, or a clearer sense of purpose. Instead of having your spirit crushed by their mistreatment, you found that your soul grew more steadfast. That is the paradox of divine orchestration. Through the trials of encountering such a person, you emerged with greater resilience. In this entire story, there is a profound lesson about justice. Too often we yearn for dramatic spectacles of vengeance or decisive acts of retribution, but God's justice is sometimes more intricate, woven into the fabric of everyday life. It can manifest as slow but unmistakable transformations, doors that slam shut unexpectedly, relationships that fade, restlessness that never quite leaves the heart of the unrepentant. It shapes itself around each individual's secret regrets and innermost failings, prompting them to see what they did and to recognize exactly when they turned away from grace. And in the end, that is a justice more powerful than any lightning strike, because it steadily dismantles the illusions they built and confronts them with the stark reflection of their own choices. You, meanwhile, can walk free, unburdened by their games and illusions. You do not have to bear the weight of wondering if you were enough or if your warning was clear. You were exactly where you were meant to be, exactly when God ordained it. Your presence was purposeful. You shone a light into their darkness and offered them a path toward redemption. If they chose to mock that path, the consequences settle on them alone. Once you recognize this, you set down the burden, step forward with renewed strength, and move into the future God has planned for you. That future is free of the manipulations and distortions of someone who refused to see the miracle right in front of them. So let this be a final reflection. God uses his people as carriers of hope, as instruments of grace, as testaments to the better road. Not everyone will accept that offering. Some, especially those immersed in narcissism, will remain fixated on their hollow sense of power. They'll assume they can discard you and keep winning. The truth, however, reveals itself in time. No one escapes the hand of justice, and no one can replicate the gifts they so carelessly threw away. The story they are left with is one of regret, a regret that stings in the quiet hours, that pricks at their mind with no relief in sight. By then, you are long gone, forging a path aligned with divine favor. You may look back only to realize how incredibly far God has taken you from that place of pain, and you can be grateful. You were the warning they refused to heed. You were the voice they dismissed. Yet you remain safe in the knowledge that you did your part. If there is a moral etched into the heart of your experience, it is this. Sometimes God calls us to be that final wake-up call in someone else's life. And when we have done what was required, he lifts us beyond their reach, ensuring we no longer stand in harm's way. The rest is between them and the one who sees all things and settles every account.